All right, we have found comps. We have gone through the bid sheet, so now you should understand exactly how this bid sheet works. Now we're going to talk to motivated sellers. Again, this is the reason why we want your phone calls to go to voicemail. We do not want them pinging off of your cell phone. We want them to go to voicemail. That way you can get your homework done, you can get prepped so that you're on top of your game when you're returning calls to these motivated sellers. Now, when you call these motivated sellers back, you are going to start by building rapport. So you're going to talk to them about their kids, you may talk about the weather, you might talk about sports a little bit, whatever you can find that's in common. You also want to kind of talk about the house that you're calling about, get the story behind it. The house that we're working on right now, this 915 Madison here in Des Moines, the family decided that they needed to move away from town because of their kids and they needed to be in a better school district, so they moved. That was at the lowest part of the economy. So they decided that they were going to rent the property out. And when they rented the property out, the renters destroyed the property. Well, banks will not loan on a second house. They will not put a second mortgage on it. They will not give construction loans on a second home. So instead, they decided they were just going to get rid of it. So I've got a hold of it. Now, a couple things. We talked about this between the high bid and the low bid being your sweet spot. Now, please understand, as you saw in the last bid sheet, that the low bid could be a negative. In fact, the low bid on the last one was quite negative. I've seen some even lower than that. So I want you to focus on the low bid at being zero. So if we want to call the sweet spot from zero to $51,018 on this one, when you're talking to the motivated seller, you know where your place is. So when you're talking to them, you've built a rapport, everything's good, and now it's time to talk about money. You ask them, Mr. Motivated Seller, sounds like you got yourself a pretty decent house there. Is there a price you're looking for to get out of that property? If he comes back to you and says, Nick, I'm thinking about $40,000. Right there we stop. We don't talk about price anymore. We do not negotiate. My philosophy is that you sell in your seat, you close on your feet. So it's best to go face to face to negotiate with at any time with a motivated seller. So you are setting up an appointment because it is fell in the sweet spot between your high bid and your low bid. Again, keep in mind that low bid is always zero. Now, so you set up an appointment. Now, a different scenario is if he comes back to you and says, Nick, I'm thinking about $62,000 for the property. Well, there's several questions that you could ask. For example, is the roof in good shape? How about the furnace? The windows? How old's the siding? Is it in livable condition? Does the furnace work? There's several questions that you just want to kind of get an idea of what's going on. I always look at the big ticket items. So the mechanicals, so the furnace, water heater, air conditioner, also look at the roof and the siding and the windows. Those are all big ticket items when it comes to an investor or consumer alike. If he comes back to you and says, Nick, the furnace was just replaced about 4 years ago, right after they moved into that place. And the roof's in good shape. It's about 6, 7 years old. There's no leaks in it. The siding was just done and painted 5 years ago. The AC was replaced about 2 years ago. And everything's in good shape. It's in livable condition. Well, at $58,000 to $60,000, it's worth going and looking at. So you've deemed it necessary. You set up an appointment to go look at that property. Now, if he comes back and he says, Nick, there's a couple leaks in the roof. We're not quite sure where they're coming from because the water moves every time it rains. The siding, there's a couple pieces falling off, but you put new pieces on and paint it, you'll never know. The furnace, it hasn't ran in a couple years. The air conditioner was, all of the Freon was taken out of it. A couple of the windows are broke. Well, there's really no reason to keep going on with that conversation because you know yourself that it's above the high bid. There's quite a bit of work that's going to need to be done to the property. So you'd say something like, well, Mr. Motivated Seller, I'm sure you've got a really nice house. But in that neighborhood and that type of a house with that type of work, it's kind of outside of the comfort level that I have of spending for a property like that. So if it's all right with you, maybe in 30 days or so, I'll give you a call. Maybe your position or my position for that fact may change and we might be able to work out a deal. And then we put it in the spreadsheet as a callback 30 days from now. Guys, we do not want to burn these leads. Just because you don't think something will happen with it doesn't mean that it won't. I've seen things come up 7, 8, 9 months down the road because I've called them back and worked that lead until I can't work any more out of it. So unless they've called you and said, don't call me back, or I've sold the property, or I'm just not going to budge on the price, I would still not budge on the price. I'd still call back in 30 days and have called back in 30 days. So in another scenario, if you call the Motivated Seller, you've built that rapport, and he comes back to you and says, Nick, thinking about $90,000 for that property. Well, really, there's no reason to continue that conversation. It's time to just get off of the phone. But the reality is we don't want to burn that lead. So I would say something like, well, Mr. Motivated Seller, I really do appreciate your time. And I'm sure you have a beautiful house. But in that neighborhood and that style of a house, it's a little higher than what I'm comfortable at spending. So if it's all right with you, I'll call you back in 30 days or so. Maybe your position or my position for that fact may change, and we might be able to work out a deal. We never shut off or burn that lead unless it is 100% gone. It's sold or they told us to not call back anymore. Now, one last thing, and I hate to leave this towards the end, but I believe it's the best part. If you've gotten a call and they didn't leave a message, guys, I've made a lot of deals on calls that never left a message because I'm not afraid to call them back. And I'd call them back and say something like, Mr. Motivated Seller, this is Nick Bailey. I'm sure you got one of them fantastic letters in the mail from me about a property that you have for sale. Is it still for sale? Well, yes, Nick, it is. Well, fantastic. Hey, I'm headed into a meeting. I wanted to make sure that you got taken care of. Can I get you to give me that address and the best phone number to reach you at, which I'm assuming it's this one, but I want to make sure. And I'll call you back here this afternoon or tomorrow sometime, and we'll talk about the property after I've got all my T's crossed and all my I's dotted. And I get that address, I get off the phone and get my work done, get my research done so I know what I'm talking about. So don't hang up the phone 40 minutes from now after you just told them that you're headed into an appointment. Get the information, extract that address, and get off the phone. Well, good luck, guys. We'll see you on the next video on the option contract.